First thing we're going to be talking about is the huge improvement over the mirrorless cameras. This is the 1080p codec. The A7 cameras have terrible 1080p compared to the FS5, which both of them shoot at, around 50 megabits per second. While on the FS5 you get a beautiful clean 10-bit 1080p, but on the A7 you get the 8-bit that is noisy and lacks contrast. You can see a comparison video I made between these two cameras on my channel. It's very important to have good 1080p because for shooting people I actually prefer using 1080p over 4K. And that is because people just look better in 1080p. Now if you're watching a comparison video between 1080p versus 4K, you might be like, what are you talking about, yak? 4K looks better. And that is kind of true because 4K is sharper, but sharper is not always better. You only need 1080p to get a clear image of someone. So what do you get when you shoot 4K? You start getting a clear image of their imperfections. You start seeing their acne, their pores, or if they mess up their makeup, you start seeing the mascara in their eye. So personally, I don't like shooting in 4K and I only really do it if I'm going to be doing some cropping. And now with the cameras that are coming out that are 8K, I'm kind of rolling my eyes because you only really need 1080p and maybe 4K if you're going to be cropping to 1080p. Now this is another big one, which is one of the big reasons why I upgraded from my A7R3 that I'm shooting with to the FS5, which is that you can only shoot for 30 minutes with this camera. Now there are some ways around it, like I know that if with the older models you can download a program on it to get past this problem, or if you use an external recorder, but then you're dealing with the camera overheating or the external recorder not working or running out of battery. So it's just a pain in the ass if you're recording a conference or an interview for an hour. You don't want to lose that footage because of something dumb like that. With the FS5 you can shoot long as you want, you can plug the camera to AC power, and it has relay recording with 2 SD cards. So you can fill up one SD card and it will switch to the other card, so you can pretty much just shoot forever without having to worry about the camera going to die or you're running out of space. With the FS5 you get 2 XLR ports, which is a huge time saver since you don't have to worry about having an external recorder to use professional audio equipment with. And you get 2 of them, which means that if you have 2 people talking, you can put lavalier mics on both people, or if you have only one person, you can set up a boom mic like how I'm doing right now over here, and you can also put a lavalier mic on them as a backup audio. Now we already talked about the amazing 10-bit 1080p out of this camera. But if you're shooting 4K, then it only does 8-bit, which is the same as this camera right here. Now that's where the RAW upgrade comes in, and if you have the Mark II, it already has that. But the RAW upgrade lets you shoot RAW externally with this camera. And when you do that, you can get 4K 10-bit ProRes and 4K 12-bit RAW, which is amazing. And it's not even just that, you can even shoot 120 FPS with this camera in 4K 12-bit. But while with the A7 cameras, you can only shoot up to 30 FPS in 4K 8-bit, and in 1080p you can shoot up to 120 FPS, which is also in 8-bit. But on the FS5, you can do up to 960 FPS, which you can't even do on the FS7, but for some reason it's in this camera, so that's pretty amazing. Now the 960 FPS is not the best looking footage, it kind of looks terrible, but you can get usable footage up to 480 FPS, and 240 that it still looks good. Now there are 2 things I absolutely hate in filmmaking, which are gimbals and ND filters. This camera doesn't really solve the gimbal issue. I wish this camera had like a Olympus level IBIS, but it doesn't. But anyways, what it does have is the best ND filter system out there. Worrying about screwing a variable ND filter in front of your lens, which is a pain to carry with you, and then if you go over a certain amount of stops, it starts vignetting, and then you walk indoors and it's too dark so you have to take it off. It's just annoying to shoot wide open, which I love doing. And don't get me started on like the square ND filters that you put on matte boxes, because they're impossible to hold, so you always end up getting smudges on them, and a lot of times you have to use 2 at a time, so they become like hard to take off, and it's just annoying. But if you have a camera and has internal ND filters, you can just press a button and boom, you got ND on it now. You can, and with the FS5 cameras, you can even set it to auto, so that when you walk outdoors and then go back inside, it automatically adjusts without having to worry about the ISO and the aperture. It just does it automatically in camera. But now the FS5 is not a perfect camera, so I'm gonna give you guys one thing, for example, that's terrible at, which is the autofocus. Now Sony has the best autofocus right now. On the A7R III that I'm using right now, I just have it on aperture 1.8 and tracks my face perfectly. As you can see, you know, it just works perfectly fine. But on the FS5, they were just like, you know that Panasonic GH5? You know what? Why don't we just like take its horrible autofocus, also put it on this camera? So this camera also uses a contrast-based autofocus, which is horrible. So here, let me just turn it on so you guys can see what it's like. So pretty much there's no autofocus on this camera. You're pretty much gonna have to focus it yourself, which is probably what you're gonna end up doing if you're the cameraman. You really need to use autofocus on a professional shoot. But I do like using the A7R3's autofocus when I'm operating 2 cameras, so that I can just focus on the FS5 and I'll just keep the A7 on autofocus, that I can pretty much trust that it will keep it in focus. But as you can see, like, it's keeping me in focus, but it just wobbles back and forth, which is really annoying. It just does that. Since it's contrast based, it just wobbles back and forth. Oh, if I go up to it, yeah, it's just going back and forth, while the A7R3 is just keeping me in focus smoothly. But the FS5 doesn't do that, unfortunately. Is it doing it? But anyways guys, both these cameras are amazing and I love using them. But this was just a video to help you out if you were thinking about upgrading to an FS5, or if you were thinking about if you should buy it or not. But I'll see you guys in the next video, and make sure to subscribe. I make new videos every week, and follow me on Instagram at YakAlmighty. And have a good day.